we've got two things. We've got a base layer protocol and we've got an application layer protocol. And so why does the Bitcoin standard work, or why is Bitcoin the best monetary system, right? How does it succeed in reality? Well, let's start with inflation, right? The scourge of inflation, which destroys fiat and destroys gold, doesn't exist. In Bitcoin, you've got a conservative system and a mathematically complete system. So it's mathematically correct, and it is conservative in a thermodynamic sense that we don't add additional energy in the system, nor does it deplete energy in the system. And the basis of that conservation is that base layer protocol, right? The base layer protocol plus the proof of work together. You could have designed a system which wasn't conservative, right? Just because you get everything else right. If Satoshi had gotten everything else right, but then left some randomness or some inflation in the token count, it wouldn't have been ideal. I think the second thing that is a big attribute for it is the difficulty of confiscation. So the private keys of cryptography are the strongest property rights in the history of the human race. So if we think about cryptography as the basis of property rights, then truthfully, the only property you can really own is digital property on a secure crypto asset network, of which the only one we know of is Bitcoin. So right now, right, the only property you can truly own is Bitcoin. Like, look, if we ever went to Alpha Centauri and we went to a new planet and we cut off communication with the Earth, it's possible that the dictator of Alpha Centauri could spin up another Bitcoin network, Centauri network. And if it was a closed system, given enough, and it had the same exact mathematics as this, as it spread as a virus and infected the billions of people on Alpha Centauri, it would be its own crypto asset network.
Right.
So you can imagine something like that. But right now, what you've got is one successful life form, and that is Bitcoin. And so you've got one successful digital property, and now we actually have an engineered property, and so you have a scientific basis for property rights. And we never had it before, and it's illustrated pretty effectively. It's like if you have $1 million and you convert the million into a building, well, the building can be seized by the mayor. By eminent domain, you can lose your building. And you can't move the building. So that the building is impaired property, and the building can be taxed. It is immobile. It can be seized. It can be taxed. And it also has physical nexus, which means, a meteorite can fall on it or an earthquake can wipe it out. So there are risks to the building. The useful life of the building is 100 years, maybe less if it's poorly constructed. So, and it's only appealing to people in that geographic political nexus. If the building was in North Korea, how valuable is a building in North Korea to an investment company in New York City?
Right.
So a building as property leaves a lot to be desired. Land as property has the same issue. A block in Manhattan is a lot more valuable than a block, in the middle of the desert. Yeah. Because the land is geographically located next to a lot of investors with a lot of money that can actually develop the land for some economic purpose. And the land can be impaired and taxed. The property tax, in fact, there's a phrase in the real estate business, they always talk about triple net. And, triple net is like after taxes, after your taxes,
your maintenance.
after your expenses,
Yeah.
etc. So these are high maintenance properties. They're very expensive and not very portable.
Yeah.
So you can rifle through the properties. Well, there's art, there's gold, there's silver, there's commodities, there's securities, there are bonds, there are currency baskets. They all have some liability. Many of them are currency derivatives, and so as currency derivatives, they have an dilution coming from the inflation of the underlying currency.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that have physicality are subject to search and seizure and impairment because you can't move them. And then others are unique maybe, but even though you might own art, people are going to keep making more, or they're going to keep making more art. And so if you're looking for a property that no one can seize, that no one can, that is hardest to impair, Bitcoin is the hardest to impair property. It's technically, I would say it's probably the hardest to tax, the hardest to destroy, and the hardest to seize, and the hardest to impair of any property available to you to purchase at this point.
I would say one thing I think is really interesting here is that, if we define property as an exclusive relationship between an owner and an asset, but that relationship requires enforcement. Typically it's enforced via the government historically, but Bitcoin's different, right? Bitcoin is this property right that's enforced.
You can enforce yourself.
Yeah, enforced by the network, and it's actually the first property right completely independent of that monopoly on violence. Like, not only does it not require enforcement by the government, but it's completely independent of the government. And that's just a lot to get your head around. I think that we've actually invented a property right fully independent of government.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it more when we get to talking about proof of work and mining and the like. Because you can go really deep into the basis of security for this property. But for the purposes of the Bitcoin standard right now, I think the most important thing to be said is it's the hardest thing to confiscate on Earth.
Yep.
And I joke, you can't take it with you. If I shoot you in the head, you can't take your gold with you. The Egyptian pharaohs built pyramids to take the gold with them. They were all robbed. If I said to you, take $1 million and buy some property, and you have to make sure that, and you're going to be murdered by somebody that you and your family next week, buy some property that they won't get after you're dead. What is that property?
There's only one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, securities and bonds and currencies won't last.
Yeah.
Gold, all these things are seizable. You can't take them with you. But if you buy Bitcoin and you hold the private keys in your head, when you die, the Bitcoin goes with you and no one else gets their hands on it. And the significance of that is because it's impossible to confiscate with force, and because it disappears with your death, then any hostile actor always has an incentive to negotiate with you. Because it's better for me to hold a gun to your head and take half of it than pull the trigger and get none of it.
Yeah.